You finally got the job you thought you wanted. The salary is good, maybe even great by most standards. It's more than your parents ever made, more than you dreamed about when you were starting out, more than enough to live comfortably by any reasonable measure. Your friends congratulate you when they hear the number. Your family is proud. You can finally afford things that felt out of reach before. A nicer apartment, a reliable car, maybe even start thinking about buying a house. You're winning by every conventional metric. And yet, somewhere around month 6 or month 12 or year 2, you wake up one morning and realize something has shifted. The job that felt like freedom when you accepted it has quietly become a cage. Not because the pay got worse, but because the pay got better. You're trapped now in a way you never were when you earned less. And the strange thing is that the trap is made entirely of the very thing everyone told you would set you free. This is what they call the golden handcuffs, and once they're on, taking them off costs more than most people can afford to pay. There's an old story about a monkey trap used in some parts of the world. The trap is simple, almost elegant in its design. You take a coconut, hollow it out, and cut a hole just big enough for a monkey's hand to slide through when it's flat and relaxed. Then you put something desirable inside, a piece of fruit or some nuts. You secure the coconut to a tree or stake it to the ground so it can't be carried away. The monkey comes along, smells the food, reaches inside and grabs it. But now its hand is closed around the food in a fist, and a fist is too large to pull back through the hole. The monkey is trapped, but only by its own unwillingness to let go of what it's grabbed. If it simply opened its hand and released the food, it would be free instantly. But the monkey can't conceive of letting go. It values what it's holding more than its own freedom, so it stays there, trapped by its grip on something it can't actually use while it's caught. This is exactly how the golden handcuffs work. You're holding onto something valuable, and that very grip is what keeps you trapped. When you first started earning the salary, you probably felt a sense of relief and possibility. Finally, you could stop worrying about certain things that had stressed you before. You upgraded your life in ways that felt reasonable and earned. You moved out of the cramped apartment into a nicer place. You got a car that doesn't break down every few months. You bought furniture that isn't secondhand. You started eating at better restaurants, taking trips you'd only dreamed about, buying gifts for people you love without calculating whether you could afford it. None of these things individually seemed extravagant. Each one felt like simply catching up to where you should have been all along. But here's what happened while you were making these reasonable upgrades. Your baseline expenses rose. To meet your new income, your rent or mortgage increased by $1,000 or $2,000 a month. Your car payment is higher because you have a newer, nicer vehicle. Your insurance costs more. You buy groceries at better stores. Your wardrobe improved because you need to look the part at this level. You started subscribing to services that make life easier. Each individual decision made sense at the time, but collectively they've done something you didn't anticipate. They've locked you into needing this exact salary or more to maintain the life you constructed around it. And now here's the trap becoming visible. You wake up one morning and realize you don't want to do this job anymore. Maybe it happened gradually. The work that once felt meaningful now feels hollow. The boss you once respected now seems unreasonable. The company culture that felt exciting now feels toxic. The projects that engaged you now bore you. The hours that seem manageable now feel suffocating. You're not growing anymore, you're just going through motions. And somewhere deep in your chest, you feel a pull towards something else, something different, something that might actually matter to you. But when you start to seriously consider leaving, when you begin looking at other options or imagining different paths, you run into a wall that stops you cold. Every alternative you can imagine pays less than what you're making now, significantly less. Maybe you'd love to work at a nonprofit doing something meaningful, but they're offering 60% of your current salary. Maybe you want to try something creative or start your own business, but that would mean unstable income, at least initially. Maybe you just want a job with better hours and less stress, but those jobs pay like entry-level positions compared to what you've become accustomed to earning. And here's where the handcuffs lock tight. You can't take any of those paths without dismantling the life you've built around your current income. Let's be very specific about what leaving would actually cost you. You'd have to move to a cheaper place, which means uprooting everything, losing the space you've grown attached to, maybe moving to a worse neighborhood or farther from friends and the life you've built. You'd have to sell the car and get something older, less reliable, the kind of car you thought you'd left behind. You'd have to cut subscriptions and services that have become part of your daily routine. No more gym membership at the nice place. No more regular dinners out. No more spontaneous weekend trips. No more buying books or clothes or small luxuries without calculating the cost. You'd have to tell your family that you can't help them financially the way you've been doing. You'd have to watch friends continue living at the level you can no longer afford, and either awkwardly decline invitations or constantly explain why you can't participate. You'd have to downgrade your entire life visibly and publicly and answer questions from everyone about why you're taking such a big step backward. This is what makes the handcuffs golden. They're not forcing you to stay against your will. They're making the cost of leaving higher than you're willing to pay. But here's what's happening to you while you stay in a job you don't want because you can't afford to leave. Every morning you wake up knowing you're trading your time and energy for money that you need to maintain a lifestyle that requires you to keep trading your time and energy. You're trapped in a perfect loop where the compensation that was supposed to give you freedom has become the mechanism that prevents you from being free. And this does something to your psychology over time that's hard to articulate but very real. You start to feel resentful toward the very things you worked so hard to acquire. The nice apartment doesn't feel like an achievement anymore. It feels like an anchor. The car isn't a symbol of progress. It's a monthly obligation that keeps you stuck. The lifestyle upgrades that once brought satisfaction now feel like chains. But you can't admit this out loud because it sounds absurd. How can you complain about earning good money and living comfortably? How can you say you feel trapped by success? So you keep these feelings private, and the private resentment grows. And it's not just resentment. There's also a deeper, more existential cost that accumulates over the years. You stay in the golden handcuffs. You stop asking what you actually want from your life and career because that question has become too painful to consider seriously. What you want and what you can afford are two completely different things now, and the gap between them is unbridgeable without sacrifice you're not willing to make. So you stop wondering about your real desires and you start justifying your current path. You tell yourself the work is fine, it's not that bad, lots of people have it worse. You tell yourself that meaning and fulfillment are overrated anyway, that being practical and financially stable is what matters. You tell yourself you'll do this for just a few more years until you've saved enough to have options, but those few years keep extending because you can never quite save enough since your expenses keep rising along with any raises you receive. You tell yourself that this is what being an adult means, accepting reality and making the responsible choice. And maybe all of that is partially true. But what you're not acknowledging is that you've stopped living according to your own values and started living according to a salary number. The amount you earn has become the organizing principle of your entire existence. And everything else, your time, your energy, your relationships, your potential, your remaining years on Earth, is being arranged around maintaining that number. Let's talk about what this looks like over a longer timeline, because the golden handcuffs don't just trap you for a year or two, they trap you for decades if you let them. You're 35 or 40 or 45, and you've been in these handcuffs for 10 or 15 years. You've received promotions and raises during that time, which should feel like progress, but somehow doesn't. Each raise just raised your expenses to match. Each promotion just increased your responsibilities and stress, while making it even harder to leave because now you're earning even more and have even more to lose. You look back at your younger self, the one who had big dreams and possibilities, and you barely recognize that person. Not because you've grown and evolved in meaningful ways, but because you've slowly contracted into a smaller, safer version of yourself. The dreams didn't die dramatically, they just faded quietly year by year as you chose the practical path over and over again. And now you're at a point where the idea of changing course feels impossible. You've got a mortgage, kids in school, aging parents who might need help, a lifestyle that depends on two high incomes if you're married. The walls of the cage are higher and thicker than they've ever been. You're not living the life you imagined, but you're also not willing to blow up the life you have because the stakes are too high now. And here's the cruelest part of the golden handcuffs. They don't just trap you financially and professionally, they trap you in a specific identity that becomes harder to escape the longer you wear them. You are now a person who earns this amount of money. That's part of how you see yourself and how others see you. You're the successful one in your family. You're the friend who can afford nice things and pick up the check. You're the colleague at this level of seniority and compensation. This identity feels good in some ways. It's evidence that you've made it, that you're doing well by society's standards. But it also becomes a prison of its own because changing your path would mean changing your identity in ways that feel like moving backward. Nobody wants to be the person who peaked early and then slid down. Nobody wants to be seen as someone who couldn't hack it at the higher level. So you protect this identity even when it's making you miserable, because losing the identity feels worse than enduring the misery. There's a famous Zen koan about a student who came to a master and said he wanted to learn meditation to achieve enlightenment. The master asked him why he wanted enlightenment. The student said he'd heard that enlightened people were free from suffering. The master picked up an empty cup and held it out to the student. He said, "This cup is useful because it's empty. If I fill it with water, it serves a purpose, but it's no longer empty. If I fill it with stones to keep it full, it can never serve its original purpose again. You're like a cup filled with stones. You think the stones are valuable because they're heavy and solid and real, but they're preventing you from being what a cup is meant to be." The student asked how he could empty the cup. The master said, "You already know how. You simply have to be willing to let the stones fall. But as long as you believe the stones are more valuable than emptiness, you'll keep holding them. This is the golden handcuffs in a different form. You know how to remove them. You know exactly what you need to do. You need to be willing to let go of the compensation, to downgrade your lifestyle, to release the identity you've built around your earning level. But you believe what you're holding onto is more valuable than the freedom you'd gain by letting it go. And so you stay locked. Here's what most people don't want to acknowledge about the golden handcuffs. They're not actually locked. There's no external force keeping them on your wrists. You're choosing to wear them every single day because the alternative seems worse. And maybe it is worse. Maybe the rational calculation says that enduring this job is better than the alternatives available to you right now. But that calculation comes at a cost that you might not be fully accounting for. The cost is time, and time is the one resource you can never recover once it's spent. Every year you spend in the golden handcuffs is a year you didn't spend doing something you actually cared about. Every year is a year you didn't explore other possibilities, didn't take risks, didn't find out what you might have been capable of if you weren't trapped by your compensation. And years add up into decades, and decades become your one life. And at the end of that life, you're going to look back and measure what you did with the time you had. Are you going to feel good about the fact that you maintained a certain salary level and lifestyle? Or are you going to wish you'd been brave enough to let go of the golden handcuffs and see what else was possible? Tomorrow, you'll go to work at the job that pays you well and makes you miserable. You'll sit through meetings that feel meaningless and complete tasks that don't matter to you and interact with people who drain your energy. And at the end of the day, you'll get paid, and that payment will feel like compensation in every sense of the word. Compensation for your time, compensation for your energy, compensation for the life you're not living because you're living this one. And then you'll go home to the nice apartment or house that requires this salary. You'll drive the nice car that requires this salary. You'll maintain the lifestyle that requires this salary. And another day will pass in the golden handcuffs. Another day where you chose security over freedom, comfort over meaning, the known trap over the unknown possibility. The question isn't whether the handcuffs exist. You can feel them right now, the weight of them, the restriction they create in your choices and your dreams. The question is whether you're willing to see them clearly for what they are, not some external force imposed on you, but a trade you keep making. You're trading your freedom for gold, day after day, year after year, and maybe that trade is worth it. Maybe the gold really is more valuable than what you'd gain by being free. But maybe it's not. Maybe you've been overvaluing the gold and undervaluing the freedom for so long that you've forgotten what freedom even feels like. Maybe the handcuffs have been on so long that you've started to believe they're just part of you now, something you can't remove without losing yourself. But they're not part of you. They're something you're holding on to. And at any moment, you could choose to let go, sit with that possibility, not to make a dramatic decision or blow up your life impulsively, but just to acknowledge that the choice exists. The handcuffs are golden, but they're still handcuffs. They restrict where you can go and what you can reach for and who you can become. And every day you wear them is a day you're choosing the gold over the freedom. Make that choice consciously if you're going to make it. Understand what you're trading and what you're getting in return. Because one day, maybe years from now, you're going to look back on this time and ask yourself whether the trade was worth it, whether the golden handcuffs gave you something valuable enough to justify everything they took away. That's the question you'll carry with you, and only you can answer it.